A very good morning, all of you. Today we are going to see one of the important topic in IGCSE biology, which is reproduction in plants. We know plants can also reproduce just like how the human can. This reproduction in plants is through the flowers or through the different parts. Not all the plants can produce flowers. So how do the non-flowering plants can reproduce? We will see one by one in detail. First, while talking about the non-flowering plants, these can reproduce by an important method called as vegetative propagation. So through this process, the vegetative parts such as root, stem or leaf can propagate into a new individual or an offspring. As you can see here, there are so many examples shown are vegetative propagation. Some are through leaves, some are through root and some are through the stem. Now we will see one by one about the stem, root as well as the leaf propagation with examples. Now coming to the underground stem, so these underground stems they grow underground by developing some buds. Here you can see potato being a tuber. When they develop the buds over that in the form of eye, these buds can develop into a new offspring. Similarly, there are some other examples for these underground stem. The other one is onion. Here in onion, the onion develop a bulb-like structure. When they produce the buds, these buds they grow into a new onion plant, which are surrounded by the scaly leaves for its protection. There is also another underground stem in your portion, which is rhizome. The difference between the potato, onion, and rhizome is completely an horizontal underground stem. Instead of growing vertically, they grow horizontally. One best example for this rhizome is garlic or ginger. So here they develop the buds, they grow horizontally, and once these buds grow into a new individual, it develops its colonies. Then moving on to the next one, which is root propagation. The root develop adventitious root. So these adventitious roots, they grow into a new individual and they develop their colonies. Some examples for root propagation are carrot, turnip, radish, beetroot, sweet potato. And one more example is leaf. The best example for leaf propagation is bryophyllum. Bryophyllum develop very broad leaves. On the leaves, it has so many leaflets like structure. When these leaflets fall down, it can grow into a new plant. So, bryophyllum can propagate through the leaf. Now, these vegetative propagation together we call it as asexual reproduction because it involves only one parent and there are no gametes produced. The offsprings which are produced in asexual reproduction are genetically identical to each other and they share the characteristics of the parent. As they are growing from the buds, they can grow large number of plants in a very short duration of time. They need not have to wait for the other parent. The cell division is only mitotic here, whereas the sexual reproduction involves two organisms, a male as well as a female. The gametes are very important in a sexual reproduction as the offspring which is produced is a mixture of male and female gamete. It shows genetic variation. The gametes produced by the meiosis and the zygote is developed after fusion. This develops by mitotic division. So sexual reproduction involves meiosis. The number of offspring produced in sexual reproduction is very less compared to the offspring which are produced in asexual, and the time taken for sexual reproduction is also very large compared to that of the asexual. But sexual reproduction has some more advantages compared to the asexual reproduction because the sexual reproduction produces genetically varied offspring. These varied offspring are adaptable and hence they are tolerant to diseases. But here, as these offsprings in asexual reproduction are genetically identical, it can spread diseases very quickly. When one offspring is affected, it can soon affect the other offsprings. Now let us see about the sexual reproduction in flowers. We know that flowering plants, they produce very beautiful flowers. Not all the flowers they look the similar. For example, when you look at the hibiscus or the rose flower, their petals are different. The shape is different. Now let us see what are the important parts in common flowering plants. We will categorize it into four different parts. The first one is sepal, the second one is petal, the third one is stamen, which is the male reproductive part, and the fourth one is pistil, which is the female reproductive part. Not all the flowers have both male and the female reproductive part. So they are called as incomplete flowers. The flowers which have both male and female reproductive parts are called as complete flowers. Now let us see about each and every part here. First, coming to the sepals look green in color just like a leaflet-like structure. So these sepals, they protect the budding stage of the flowers. Next to the sepals are the petals. Petals are brightly colored to attract the insects and the pollinators for pollination. The number of petals vary in monocotyledon as well as in dicotyledon. We have already seen in characteristics the monocot has 3 or multiples of 3 number of petals, whereas the dicot has 4 or multiples of 5 petals in them. Now coming to the male reproductive part, which is a stamen, which comprises of two important regions. The first one is anther, which is holded by a filament. This filament is a stalk-like structure which holds the anther to expose it to the pollinators. The anther is a bag-like structure which produces the pollen grains, so called the male gamete. The pistil has three important regions. The first one is called a stigma, to which the pollen grains attaches during the pollination. The style is the region through which the pollen tube is developed to enter the male gamete into the ovary. The ovary contains the ovules, which are the female gametes. So, in flowers, there are two important gametes. The male gametes are the pollen grains, and the female gametes are the ovules. Now, while you dissect a flower, you have to first take off the petals. And when you take off the petals, you can see the anthers, the stigma very clearly there. So, take off all the anthers from that, and the receptacle. You can see the broad portion, the swollen portion at the base is called as the ovary. When you open the ovary, you can see the ovules inside. We cannot see clearly the ovules with our naked eye, but we can use a microscope to see this. When you dissect a flower, you have to dissect it with a needle so that you can dissect it perfectly to see all the parts. Fine. Let us see what is a pollination is. A pollination is the process in flowering plants during which the pollens from the anther are transferred by the pollinator to the stigma of the female reproductive part. So, this pollination can happen within a flower or it can happen from one flower to other flower. If it happens within the flower, it is called as self-pollination. If this happens from one flower to other flower, it is called as cross-pollination. Remember, when the pollens are transferred to a different species, it cannot pollinate because it is a different species which do not match with the genes. Now coming to some of the agents of pollination, there are some agents which are helping with this pollination. We know that flowers, animals, insects, all these are helping with the pollination. But apart from that, there are also other agents of pollination. Some are wind, some are water. Now, how do the plants adapted for different agents of pollination? As you can see in the figure, a dandelion, which are very feathery and very lightweighted, can fly away very quickly. Okay, let us see one by one. Here, we are going to talk about the wind pollinated flower. In a wind pollinated flower, we can see the anthers or dangles loosen and thus exposing the pollens. There are many number of anthers in this which are very feathery and loose. Okay, so these anthers, they produce large number of pollens because during a wind pollination, a large number of pollens can be wasted. So, in order to match that, it has to produce a large number of anthers. Okay, and the stigma is also very feathery to catch the pollens. Now, talking about the insect pollinated flower, the insect pollinated flower produces the pollen which are very sticky so that it can stick to the stigma. The flowers contain a juicy, sugary nectar and they also produce a very good odor which attracts the insect. They are also brightly colored to attract the eyes of the insects or the other pollinators. The anthers and the stigma they hang and they are exposed so that the insects can reach them. Now, talking about the fertilization, soon after the pollination is over, when the pollens are transferred to the stigma, a very temporary tube called as a pollen tube is developed from the stigma to the ovary inside the ovules. When these pollen tube carry the male gamete to the ovary contains the ovule, which are the female gametes, which fuse with the male gamete and produce a zygote. So this is called as fertilization, the fusion of the male nuclei and the female nuclei to produce a zygote. This zygote grows into another plant. Now, the ovary after fertilization develop into a seed. The ovule after fertilization develop into a seed and the ovary develop into a fruit. Now, we have some more important extra content added here. This is called as double fertilization. Fertilization happens twice inside the ovule. The ovule contains the embryo sac where two male gametes enter. As we have already discussed, the one male gamete fused with the ovule and produce the zygote which is diploid. So we know that gametes are always haploid. So 1 plus 1 gives 2, which means n plus n gives 2n, zygote is diploid. So this type of fusion is called as syngamy. And there are some type of free nuclei called as polar nuclei available within the embryo sac of the ovule. So these polar nuclei, they are also haploid. So here as we have two polar nuclei, they are 2n. And when these polar nuclei are fused with the sperm cell or the male gamete, it produces a triploid nucleus. This type of fusion is called as triple fusion, which makes the endosperm of the fruit. So, since the fertilization happens two times by syngamy and triple fusion, this is called as double fertilization. Thank you. Hope you liked this video.